Former FBI National Joint Terrorism Task Force member Steve Rogers. Hedgeye CEO Keith McCullough this morning with us, along with Dagan McDowell all morning with us. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So they had GoPro cameras on. They were all suited up. They went in. They had a mission. They knew what they were going to do, and they did it. What does that tell you?
This tells me this was a terrorist attack. I don't understand why in situations like this our government has to be worried about offending people, being politically correct. Look, they wore body armor. The cameras, Maria, I believe were going to be used to put on the Internet if they got away with it to spread more terror. So, look, I understand the FBI is a great organization. I believe we haven't been attacked catastrophically because of their hard work. But there has to come a time when we got to be straight with the American people and say, look, this is what happened. This is a terrorist attack, whether it's foreign-inspired or domestic or lone wolves, is something they have to conclude during the investigation. But it was a terrorist attack.
You know, well planned, they say, well planned. Like I almost felt like I was watching Homeland, and I don't mean to say that disrespectfully. It looked like there's something bigger at work there. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, Keith, bigger at work. The other issue is anyone else involved? You know, this is very important.
That's what I mean.
I was concerned when there was a lot of broadcasting about this. Is somebody watching those of us on TV and the media relaying to them information? These are not mentally ill people. They were well-educated people, sophisticated, and I say that because they planned, as you said, Keith, they planned this attack, but more importantly, they planned an escape. And that's pretty important to think about.
Steve, what do you do from here? Will Carr on the Fox News channel was reporting that one of the neighbors in Redlands saw suspicious activity in the days and leading up to this attack, where there were a lot of people around the where this couple lived. They were showing up, the activity at night, and she said that she didn't report it because she was afraid that she would be accused of racial profiling.
I am glad you brought that up, because look at the fear that our government has instilled in the American people. So fearful that if they say something, that they're going to get in trouble themselves. This is going on in police work today. Police officers are fearful to take that extra step because they'll be brought up on charge of racial profiling. What do? You share with people at one point in time. The political establishment and leaders in this country have to say, we will watch your back, we will take care of you, come forward, because you know what? If you don't say something, something like this could happen again.
What do you think the FBI is looking at now in terms of finding out the motive, finding out what's next, or if, in fact, there was another attack planned?
Well, they're going to look at their social media. That's very important. There may be electronic footprints somewhere else in the country that they were communicating with or overseas. That is right now what they're focusing on.
And there would have to be. If you're saying that there's almost like a puppet master watching this develop and giving them instructions on the getaway, that they have to be using.
And we don't know that happened, but Keith, it's possible. The fact is, was this a cell? Are there other sleeper cells?
Right.
And again, we just need to be straight with the American people, because if you're straight, your best intelligence gathering group are the American people in each and every one of these neighborhoods.
But as a law enforcement official, the less that you tell the public initially, isn't it better for your investigation if you really want to uncover what's going on?
If it doesn't compromise the investigation, you're right. But I'm glad they came out and said there was an SUV that left the scene, because that enabled them to start looking for SUVs all over the place. And I think that's what, why they had a quick apprehension.
ISIS is not taking responsibility for this, but there was a report right after the shooting yesterday that ISIS was celebrating online, sending out, celebratory notes and posts as a result of what has taken place, but they are not taking responsibility, as far as we know.
But could you imagine what ISIS would do if they got their hands on the videos? If those videos were put on the Internet, they would use that as propaganda. But we must keep in mind that
you have to believe that was the goal, because they have these GoPro cameras on.
Why would they have them? But keep in mind that as the FBI investigates this, they may find that there was some influence that they saw on the Internet. ISIS has a great propaganda machine. So these people could have been watching ISIS videos, etc., and were inspired to do this. Look, we don't believe, and I really don't believe, that there's this mass idea that all Muslims are bad people. That's ridiculous. There are a lot of good people in the Muslim community, but there are bad people everywhere. And it just so happens to be that this is the profile, the criminal profile, not the racial profile, but the criminal profile.
Well, how do you deal with that? You have a 28-year-old whose colleagues effectively said he was acting normal, 6-month baby in the community.
They dropped the baby off with relatives before they did the shooting.
Is that typical? Like something something that intelligence is very much aware of, that these people are living in the country?
Oh, yes, it's it. Look, I read the Al-Qaeda training manual a few years ago. They talked about embedding yourself in the community, get involved in their government, get involved in their educational institutions. And you know what, Keith? They weren't talking about a program that would last a month. They're talking about years of getting involved in our country and then striking and striking hard.
Wow.
Steve, stay with us. You're going to be with us this morning, and we appreciate your time today because we need to tap into your expertise in terms of the FBI steps next. We continue our team with the breaking news out of San Bernardino. Of course, here's what we know at this time. As Cheryl just told us, the two suspects were a married couple. They are now dead. They've been identified as Syed Farouk and Tashfid Malik. 14 people have been killed, 17 others wounded. Terrorism has not been ruled out as a motive. The Joint Terrorism Task Force is involved, and we are talking this morning with Keith and Dagan. Steve Rogers is here from the FBI. And Steve, this whole idea of these two wearing the GoPro cameras, let's talk about that for a moment, because they're all suited up. What does that tell you in terms of what they were trying to do? Is there anything else that can be gleaned from the fact that they had those cameras on, other than what you said earlier, that you think they wanted to just be able to show the world what they had just done?
Well, the fact is that that's exactly what they wanted to do. We heard the police chief say something very significant. He shut down the idea that this was workplace violence by saying what he said.
You think
because,
so?
Yes. Why? Well planned. They had planned by putting on all this armor with the long rifles. And let me share this with you, too. And this is very important. When we talk about a well-planned operation, they had to be there weeks before, days before. There was reconnaissance done. They had to know exactly who they were going to hit, where they were going to hit. And isn't it interesting that that was the only building that there was no security in? Mostly other building has securities. And so, as I said, when the president and these other politicians say, well, we got to issue edicts on gun control, on mental illness, has nothing to do with that.
These weapons were purchased legally, according to the report.
But you know, they were used by terrorists. And 38 years as a law enforcement officer, I have never seen a bad guy come into my office and turn a gun.
But why were they quiet? That's what I understand. They were quiet. What we saw in Paris was the attackers were screaming Allah Akbar, excuse me. That's what they were screaming. Every witness so far has told us that they were just completely quiet and silent. That does not say terrorist attack. And to your point, Maria, earlier, ISIS not accepting responsibility. That's what a lot of things still don't add up.
But terror comes in all shapes and forms.
Yeah, there's not a plain white terrorist.
There's not a template.
But maybe quiet. The cameras that they had on not only had video, could have had audio. Obviously, they wanted to get away. All right, so if they were to post a video with their voices on there, that's another piece of evidence finding them. I really believe they did not want to engage the police. If they did, they would have stayed there, and it would have been a deadly shootout, and they would have been killed on the scene. They wanted to get away to post those videos, and they failed miserably.
Yeah, it was so planned. That's what's really extraordinary about this, which is why you cannot rule out terrorism.
Well, no, and who else? You know, it's planned. But I don't believe just by them. There had to be other elements there.
You think there's a bigger plan here?
Well, yeah, and keep in mind, I think they said there's another suspect that they did not release the name of.
Yeah, unnamed suspect.
That tells me there's an ongoing investigation. They're doing a lot of work on that suspect.
And you also said, in 38 years, you've seen a lot that most Americans have not seen. The plan is actually a life plan. There's a manual to do this. This is a long-term plan.
Oh, yeah, look.
Police said the attackers looked like they were on a mission. That was the quote from
they were on a mission.
Their home was an IED factory, and that's another quote from law enforcement.
Yeah. What workplace violence person is building bombs and leaving devices and explosives? A bigger plan. The question is, and this was what I was concerned about, if they didn't capture them, were they going to hit again? And who are they communicating? They all communicate with someone. There are other people, I believe, that are involved in some way, shape, or form. You got to find them.
We want to talk about the reaction that we've seen so far. Cheryl, thank you. Cheryl's going to have all the latest throughout the morning. President Obama addressed these mass shootings. A National Joint Terrorism Task Force member. And Steve, this Quinnipiac University poll obviously becomes so much more relevant today, and that is homegrown jihadists are more dangerous than refugees. U.S. voters tell the Quinnipiac University National Poll that these homegrown jihadists are becoming increasingly a worry. What's your take on this?
Well, yeah. Look, you could get a homegrown jihadist born right in your home and not even know it. I mean, your kid, teenager, no matter what age, you're looking at the computer, they're looking at all that's going on. And remember, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these terrorist organizations are targeting these groups. And right in the living room, right in the bedroom. They could be reading every day, reading about how do I do this, how do I plan an attack, etc.
How do we educate the country on this? I mean, I just don't want to wake up with my children. I have 4 children. We wake up in the morning, you know, we pray to God and we say to ourselves, are we aware? You know, are we aware of this as a country? The manual, as you talk about it, you know, the manual of it's not just the movie Homeland. You know, basically, you're saying that this is the real deal.
Yes, and we need, that's a great question. We need to get our educational community and institutions involved. Look at the things going on in colleges today. My goodness. The fact of the matter is that, unfortunately, we're not a very well-educated country like we used to be. We take snapshots of what we see and hear on TV and radio, and then we become part of the problem than part of the solution.
Dagan, you made a point earlier that the president last night made in the interview in terms of looking at gun control.
Bridging the gap, because it's Keith raised the issue of, is it fighting terror versus gun control? But there is a bridging the gap between the two issues. The president did bring up that we have a no-fly list where people can't get on planes, but those same people can still go out and buy a weapon, that there's no crossover. And so that you have to start thinking about, how do you prevent guns legally from getting in the hands of people who might commit an act of terror.
But he's diverting the conversation
I agree with you on that.
Addressing terrorism.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what he's doing. He's diverting the conversation.
Can you imagine on the France terrorist attack that the first thing that the French politicians did was come out and talk about gun control?
Yeah.
And that's what this president did as well last night. I mean, he went right to, this doesn't happen in other countries.
The behavioral aspect of Americans waking up today, don't forget in California, they're about to get the news. It's still very early in the morning. People are going to find the truth. And people will either understand that they have to protect themselves or educate themselves about what you called, again, there's a plan, there's effectively a methodology and a methodological way whereby somebody does what this 28-year-old Farouk did in California.
I think they're going to be stunned that there were people in that neighborhood, now we know of one, I'm sure there were others, who had suspicions about a lot of unusual activity that do not normally go on.
Right.
And there's going to be a wake-up call. And we've said it over and over again. Unfortunately, the American people have been conditioned from the White House to say, you see something, say nothing.
Yeah.
See, I think that
we have to reverse it. You see something, say something.
Here in New York City, I think, personal opinion, that the events of 9/11 are still so raw in our memories that we are much more vigilant in this city, looking for anything that is suspicious. A suspicious package in the street, suspicious activity, neighbors, their behavior maybe not making sense. But broadly speaking, here's a man who was born, I mean, there's just some of the background, that Farouk was born in Illinois. He was raised in Southern California. His parents his family was originally from Pakistan, but he traveled to, and this is according to many of the reports, traveled to Saudi Arabia earlier this year and came back with a wife, although his family has said he's been married to this woman for 2 years.
Yep.
So it's beginning to, they have a 6-month-old daughter.
Well, you know, during that period of time, George Bush, Attorney General Ashcroft were constantly on the air. See something, say something. They didn't pivot to gun control. They didn't pivot to issues that have nothing to do with terrorism.
But that's what our political leaders do. And unfortunately, that's what President Obama did last night when he was asked about this, that, you know, we see that they were all suited up with weapons. I mean, it feels like the way that Robert Gray was explaining how this took place yesterday, it feels like terrorism, but the cops are not saying that just yet.
Well, they're going to make sure they have all the dots connected before they say that.
And it could just be homegrown.
Yes, it's terrorism, all right? It's not workplace violence. It's terrorism. It could be homegrown. It could be foreign influence. But getting back to his point, the policies, the politically correct policies are now, we are paying the price for that. We have the government, the White House and the Justice Department have instilled so much fear in the American people not to take action. This guy's a hero.
Yeah.
He had the courage to go out there and protect his neighbors, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And every American should understand that you have a right to protect yourself. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned in reverse, and that has to change, and it has to change quickly.
And it even went that way last night when the president spoke. He was asked about this, and he didn't know anything about it. But he went right to gun control policy.
Well, I mean, what he should have done is gone to the Second Amendment, which is your right to keep and bear arms. I mean, the reason for that isn't a political issue. It is for emergencies like this. I mean, for one, I'm not a big, gun guy, but when I wake up in the morning and I don't have a leader waking me up to this, then I started thinking to myself, who the hell is going to protect me in my neighborhood if somebody's building this in their garage? I mean, how do you deal with this, Steve?
Right.
Well, the fact of the matter is, we've talked about it before, it's leadership. The head of the United States government, he has to wake up and realize, hey, you're safe and comfortable in a White House on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah.
We're paying the price for your failed policies.
Immediately, Steve Rogers, and basically saying this is about guns and this is about gun policy. And yet everybody we spoke with this morning on set, from George Mitchell, former senator, to Jim Kallstrom, former assistant director of the FBI, have said, of course this is terrorism. This is not about an individual crazy person with a gun.
Maybe Hillary ought to understand that what is normal today is not backing up police officers, not giving the resources to the communities that our police need to conquer this problem. What they have to understand, and they, being the political people that we're talking about, this is not a political issue, for goodness sake. This is a matter of survival for our country. We talked about, with the good guest you had on today, sending resources to the FBI. Yes, they need more agents. They need more technology. But the real meat of what we need to do is to get that money, those resources to the local cops. That's where they're on the ground. They're meeting the people. And what does the American people do when they wake up today? How am I going to protect my kids? This is what they're asking.
Right.
The key is, and we've said it, let's get back to being conditioned. You see something, say it, and say it fast.
That's how
Go the route of, oh, they're listening to all your phone calls. That wasn't true at all. That was a false proposition made by some members irresponsibly. This is a major issue here. We need every tool that we can in order to determine who's out there trying to either organize or trying to radicalize themselves. And we need all the tools that we can. We want to and we will respect the privacy of Americans, but we have given up on tools, and I think we have to take a new look at how we try to prevent these things from happening before they happen.
Steve Rogers.
Senator, there is a tool we need as a former police officer and speaking with police officers all over the country. We need our leaders to send a signal to the local cop that you're backing us, you're watching our back, you're giving us the ability to do our job. We have not heard that. We have not. All we've heard is criticisms from Washington, people jumping on the bandwagon against police. It's, in order to secure this country, we need our local cops. So my plea to you is, do whatever you could to let those men and women in blue know that our government has their back.
Out of San Bernardino, California, joining the conversation right now is Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland. KT, the FBI still will not call this terrorism. We are waiting to find any evidence that is it, in fact. But based on what you know and what we know, obviously, they had tactical gear on. Right. They had these long guns. They had GoPro cameras on. What can you tell us?
Sounds like terrorism to me, but our authorities are doing the right and responsible thing to gather all the information and then talk about it. A couple of things have struck me, though, in the last couple of hours. One, is this the new normal? Whether it's domestic terrorism, whether it's Islamic extremist terrorism, if this is the new normal, we don't have nearly enough resources for this. It takes 24 government people, in other words, state, local, FBI, NSA, to monitor a bad guy 24/7. Now, the FBI director said we have 100 of these people we're looking at now 24/7. We potentially have 1,000 in the United States right now. We are already stressed to the limit with our resources. It's not just the FBI, but the entire resource chain is stressed. So we better get really smart, really fast, and put a lot more resources immediately. The second thing is the flash to bang ratio. If these are domestic...
What is flash to bang ratio?
All right, flash to bang ratio, which you are all going to hear a lot about in the coming weeks, is the amount of time it takes from somebody who looks like a normal guy living down the street to become a terrorist who straps on a suicide vest or goes and shoots up a center. It's not years and years and years in the coming. It's usually weeks, months. Yeah. So somebody who looks just normal gets radicalized, and within a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months is committing a terrorist act. Why is that happening? It becomes very difficult to find that person because it all happens very quickly.
Yeah.
The Snowden revelations and the reaction to that has greatly hampered our ability to find these people because we're not doing the stuff a month ago that we should be able to do. And so because the flash to bang ratio is so short, you need to see these people. You need to see them immediately. You need to find them. You need to prevent them. And we don't have the tools to do it. I think we need to think about a whole new paradigm of using metadata analytics and social media monitoring.
And Katie, to that point about a whole new paradigm, I know you're very aware that human intelligence is your best intelligence.
Absolutely, but
so the issue of resources, I've been trying to get a point across to our leaders. How about sending some of those resources to the local level cop on the street? The greatest resource we have are the American people and those cops in the neighborhoods who know the who, what, when, where, and why in their neighborhood. What's your take on that?
Well, absolutely. You know, these are the people who are putting their lives on the line, who put on a uniform, whether they're in the United States military, whether it's our law enforcement officials, whether it's our fire departments. They are all on the line, and we have a national leadership which doesn't support them. The other thing I would say, though, is political correctness is now starting to cost us. If the political correctness is you don't want to say anything because you don't want to look like you're discriminating, you're not going to do the bad thing, so you hold back. Well, as you point out, we need the American people to be participants in our own security. And if there is an atmosphere of political correctness, don't you dare say, we need a safe zone where we can talk about these things.
In fact, that's what we saw yesterday because a number of witnesses, Dagan, had said that they saw packages coming in and out of Farouk, the suspect's garage.
Right, and they didn't want to report it because they would be accused of racial profiling.
And think about that point. They would call about the drug dealers and the drug trafficking, but because of the racial component and the fear, they didn't make the call.
So political correctness has now become not our friend, but our enemy. The other points I would make is, if this is a Saudi Arabia connection here, you know, we know he's gone to Saudi Arabia in the last year. He's somehow has quickly become radicalized.
Report that he grew his beard out when he got back.
Well, you know, look, a lot of guys are growing beards, including Paul Ryan. So I'm not worried about the beard part as much as I'm worried about Saudi Arabia is one of the countries where it is the most oppressive, you know, intelligence operation. You're not doing anything in Saudi Arabia without being found out. This is not Syria that he's gone to. This is not Libya. If there's something going on in Saudi Arabia, then we have a much bigger problem than we thought. And then the final point I would make is, however bad we think it is now, it's going to get exponentially worse. The refugee crisis in Europe, as the refugees are given, they can now bring their family members in, and you could have go from 1 million to 7 million in a year.
Katie, thank you.
Thank
Katie
you.
McFarland. We'll be right back. Saying that earlier they stated that European Central Bank had confounded expectations by holding interest rates rather than cutting them, and it actually moved markets. In fact, it was the wrong story. The FT is correcting it right now because, as we know and as we have reported, the ECB did cut its discount rate.
Yeah, I think we're in the age of the truth. Thank God for that. Whether it's terrorism or it's economic realities, that's what I'm going to say this morning.
Final thought, Dagan.
But a lot of people in this country are not living the truth. They're living a lie and trying to refocus what's the problem in this country is. Motive is the one word that I'm focused on today, to see what we find out.
And Steve Rogers.
We live in a great country. We're going to get through this, but we're going to get through it by working together.
And all of our guests this morning did call it terrorism. We will wait to hear what the FBI says about the California shooting. Dagan McDowell, Keith McCullough, Steve Rogers, thanks for being with us. That'll do it for us. We'll see you tomorrow. Stuart Vaughn.